Hey everyone, welcome back to Ask Amy. Today we have a question from Jasmine. Let me find and read her question. So Jasmine says, "Hi Amy, I've joined your waiting list for the next Little School Big Change, and I'm so excited for that to start." Awesome, me too. I've read your books and watched a lot of your videos. I feel a sense of calm after each video, and I know my understanding is growing. My question is probably obvious because I know that all anxiety and habits are the same thing. Yes, they essentially are. She says, "I like the idea of putting the snow globe down and stopping shaking it. I just have no idea how to do that. Most of my anxiety comes when I do public speaking for work or when I have to speak in team meetings. I blush, get dizzy, and my heart races. Occasionally, this all happens when I run into people unexpectedly. I'd love to just sit with it and experiment with the idea that it's just thought, but it's so hard to view it any other way when it's happening because it's so public and embarrassing. Sometimes people will even comment on it afterwards. Any thoughts to help me see this differently?" So, excellent question, Jasmine. And it's not one that you're alone in for sure. So the thing about it being all thought, I think sometimes, we're trying to see, okay, it's just my thought doing this. It's just thought doing this through me. And sometimes that, although that's true, it's factually true. It is the energy of thought, bringing all experience to life always. Sometimes we get a little caught up there, like it just doesn't have the oomph that we want it to have. It doesn't feel real and personal and helpful in kind of how we're seeing it. So when I read what you wrote, Jasmine, sometimes you have to do public speaking or you speak in a meeting and you start to feel some anxiety and maybe you blush and maybe you look different, and maybe you even sound a little different. Yes, thought's bringing that because only thought can. It brings all experience, this energy. That's just what's happening in that moment. It's just what's showing up through you in that moment. I guess for whatever reason, my hunch is to kind of push you to see, okay, but that's what's happening. Now, let's see how thought is creating 100% of your experience of that happening. Now, again, maybe this is no different than how you're seeing it already, but it's not about the words, and I'm not trying to be like nitpicky about it, but I want you to see that you can blush, you can feel stuff, whatever that stuff is. People can comment on it. Everything you mentioned, that feels like a really big problem, all of that stuff can be happening. And there are a million, billion, infinite number, really, of ways that you could experience that. The same thing, now the same blushing, the same nervousness, the same anxiety. I'm not saying that piece has to be different. We're saying even given exactly how it's showing up for you, given exactly what you say, you blush and people comment and they say, "Oh, you look nervous," or "What's wrong with you?" or "Why is your face red?" whatever. You said it was embarrassing and something. I can't find you right now, but you said yes. You want to see it differently because it's so public and it's so embarrassing. And what I want you to kind of lean toward and just look into is the fact that it's just life happening, and your mind comes in an instant and says, "This is embarrassing. This shouldn't be happening. How do I stop this? What's wrong with me?" And sometimes that's the piece that's easier to see as thinking. So, that is the piece that's like a subjective mind coming in and giving it all this meaning. And it does that in an instant. So you, Jasmine, aren't doing that. I'm not saying that you believe that. I'm not saying that you're doing that. I'm definitely not saying, try to think of it differently, Jasmine, or, see if you can, this is your fault because you're viewing it in that way. None of that. I just want you to see that all of us, every single one of us, has this meaning-making computer in our heads, basically, called the brain, and that experience shows up. That experience, no matter what it is safe, temporary, inherently meaningless, wonderful. And then this little meaning maker in our heads comes in and spins a story and gives a flavor to it, good, bad, have to change this, gotta figure this out, embarrassing, whatever it is we come up with, that's after the fact. So the more we can stay in this place where it's like, yes, it's coming up, it's feeling, even you being embarrassed by it, even that. Now that you're not doing that, that's just kind of more layers being added to it. But there's a you, Jasmine, that's watching this whole thing play out. And that isn't all of this meaning and all of this labeling and all of this emotion around it. There's a you that can kind of be back here and see it playing out and kind of notice it. And that's where there's so much freedom from this, is seeing that there's nothing really, I'm not telling you to do this or see it differently or feel it differently, but there's nothing really that stops you from having a very different experience of this. Again, the same thing. You still might blush, you still might feel the nerves, but it isn't embarrassing. It's part of the whole habitual thing that happens, that your mind comes in and says, this is a problem. And I know that's hard to hear sometimes, because we think, okay, that's fine, but I want this to end. That's fine, but I want this to go away. And it's hard, but I want everyone to kind of start to look toward the fact that but the only reason you want this to go away, the only reason we would say, oh, that's fine, but I still want it to change, is because we don't really, it still looks meaningful. Like we're not really seeing, that it is inherently meaningful, that it's just a thought, a feeling, an experience coming to life within us. It's going to change on its own in a minute, really. We don't always see that. And when we don't see that, that's when we're like, okay, fine, but how do I change it? Because we're not in it, seeing it for what it really is. So that's just kind of where I want to point you with this, Jasmine. Like, so what if you blush? So what if you're anxious? So what if you feel that stuff? And I'm not saying you take it on now and try to see it as so what. I'm just saying, like, it is a so what. And your mind won't let you see that. And mine too. And everybody's. That's what happens, right? Like, there's tons of things in everybody's life that we can't see as so what. That's part of being human. That's okay. We're not supposed to be neutral about everything. That would be crazy, ridiculous, boring, weird existence, right? We're not neutral about everything, but where we aren't neutral is showing us how much our personal thinking is coming in and spinning it into something that it isn't. And that's where we suffer. That's where we get caught up in these things that start to look like big problems that we need to change. So I hope something in that speaks to you in some way, Jasmine, and you can kind of feel that place where it's like, it's just life showing up through you before your mind comes in and gives it meaning, before it's a problem, before it looks bad, and you can kind of stay back in that place a little bit. And the thing about wanting to know, you want to set the snow globe down, but you have no idea how to do that, you don't do it. You don't, it's a metaphor. I mean, obviously, but it's nothing you do. It's just a way of describing what happens. So when we're back in this place and we see all this meaning is being generated and it's a problem and it's big and it's embarrassing, when we can see that that's just going on, but there's no reality to that. That's just a mind giving labels and meaning to something that it's just what a mind does. That stops the snow globe. So again, it's just about us seeing more about how this works. So I hope that's helpful. I hope, again, this is one that applies to everybody, and all of these do really, because we're all the same, but hopefully it's helpful for you, Jasmine, and for others. Thanks guys for being here and listening, and I'll see you next week.